When we first bought our little house in the suburbs, I thought life had finally turned a corner for us. After years of living in cramped apartments, juggling noisy upstairs neighbors and parking nightmares, my wife and I were thrilled to finally call something our own. It wasn't a mansion, just a cozy two-bedroom home with a tiny backyard and a white picket fence, but to us, it was everything we had saved for years, skipping vacations, eating instant noodles for dinner more often than I care to admit, just to scrape together the down payment. When we signed those papers, I felt a kind of joy I can't even put into words. We pictured family barbecues, quiet evenings on the porch, and the kind of peace we thought only a neighborhood like this could bring. At first, it seemed perfect. The neighbors across the street brought over cookies to welcome us. The older lady next door gave us gardening tips. Kids rode bikes up and down the sidewalks, waving and smiling. For a brief moment, I thought we had landed in some kind of suburban dream. Then we met him. Our next door neighbor, let's call him Rick, was the kind of man who made an impression immediately, and not in a good way. He was in his late 40s, stocky build, buzz cut, and the kind of permanent scowl that made you feel like you'd done something wrong just by existing near him. The first time we introduced ourselves, he looked us up and down like we were trespassers. "So, you're the new folks," he muttered, arms crossed, eyes darting at our moving truck. "Yeah," I said cheerfully, extending a hand. "We're really excited to be here." He didn't shake it. He just shrugged and said, "Don't block my driveway," before turning back into his house. I laughed it off, thinking maybe he'd had a bad day. But that was just Rick Gruff, territorial, and always on the lookout for something to complain about. The first week, he came over banging on our door at 9:30 p.m. because our porch light was too bright. Another time, he accused my wife of throwing trash into his yard, which was ridiculous because we both worked long hours and barely had time to take care of our own yard, let alone throw anything in his. But things escalated quickly. Rick seemed to take a personal mission to make our lives miserable. He called the city on us for improper lawn maintenance when the grass was maybe an inch too tall. He blasted heavy metal music at M, then screamed at us the next morning for making too much noise. When we started our car for work, he even stood at his window with binoculars aimed at our backyard while we tried to grill. We were stressed, exhausted, and honestly starting to regret buying our home. I could see the toll it was taking on my wife, her shoulders tense, her smile fading. This was supposed to be our safe haven, not a battlefield. But the final straw came when Rick filed a fake complaint with the Homeowners Association, accusing us of having illegal construction in the backyard. All we had was a small shed for tools, perfectly within code. Still, the HOA had to investigate, and we spent weeks stressing, gathering paperwork, and proving our innocence. That's when I decided enough was enough. If Rick wanted war, fine, but I wasn't going to fight him with yelling matches or petty complaints. I was going to let karma handle him with a little help from me. I started documenting everything, every loud party, every fake complaint, every threat. I installed cameras on the front and back of our house, capturing hours of footage of him trespassing, throwing garbage into our yard, and even damaging our property. He had a habit of accidentally spraying our garden with weed killer whenever he watered his lawn. Well, now I had proof. I kept a log with dates, times, and details. At first, it felt obsessive, but slowly, I realized I was building a case. The tipping point came one Saturday afternoon. My wife and I were in the backyard, planting flowers, when Rick came storming out of his house, red in the face. "Hey," he shouted, "that fence is on my property line. Tear it down." "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to stay calm. This fence has been here for years. It's part of the property survey we got when we bought the house. You calling me a liar? He growled, stepping closer. I pulled up my phone and hit record. Rick didn't notice, too caught up in his rage. He yelled, cursed, and even threatened to make us pay if we didn't move the fence. That was the final piece I needed. I took everything, the videos, the logs, the photos of damaged property, and filed a formal complaint with the HOE in the city. I even spoke to a lawyer who assured me we had more than enough evidence to press charges for harassment and property damage if we wanted. When the HOA meeting came, Rick strutted in like he owned the place. He had no idea what was coming. I stood up, nervous but determined, and presented everything. The videos played on a screen for the entire neighborhood to see. Rick spraying chemicals on our plants, yelling obscenities, even trespassing into our yard at night. Gasps echoed around the room. People turned to glare at him. Rick's face went pale. He stammered, trying to deny it, but the evidence was undeniable. The HOA didn't just dismiss his complaints against us. They fined him for repeated violations, ordered him to repair the damages, and warned that further incidents would result in legal action. But karma wasn't done with Rick yet. A few weeks later, word spread that Rick's employer, a local government contractor, had somehow gotten wind of the situation, apparently being caught on camera harassing neighbors and damaging property. Doesn't look good when you're supposed to be a community liaison. Within a month, Rick was out of a job. Suddenly, the man who made our lives hell was the neighborhood pariah. People who once tolerated him now avoided him. His house grew unkempt, his yard overgrown, and eventually, a for sale sign went up on his lawn. The day the moving truck pulled away, my wife and I sat on our porch, sipping coffee, watching in silence. Finally, she turned to me and smiled, the first genuine, relaxed smile I'd seen in months. Karma, she said simply. Karma, I agreed. Life in our little house is peaceful now. The garden flourishes. The neighbors wave warmly. And for the first time since moving in, it feels like home. And Rick, well, last I heard, he tried to start over in another town. But let's just say people like him rarely change. Karma always has their number on speed dial. I always believe that karma doesn't need to be forced. It just arrives on its own time. But after working under Martin Blake for nearly 4 years, I realized sometimes karma needs a little push. Martin was my boss at a mid-sized marketing firm in Chicago. Outwardly, he was the kind of guy who could charm clients at dinner, crack jokes at board meetings, and give speeches about teamwork that made upper management clap like seals. Behind the curtain, though, Martin was a tyrant. He had a special skill for making life miserable. He'd take credit for ideas, micromanage projects until deadlines collapsed, and humiliate people in front of the team. Just to show his authority, his favorites were spared, but the rest of us were collateral damage. I was one of those unlucky souls who got stuck on his radar. It started small. He forgot to invite me to important meetings, so I looked clueless when asked about project updates. Then he began editing my reports, inserting mistakes, and emailing them to clients under my name. Soon, whispers about my sloppiness began spreading. The final straw came when he deliberately sabotaged my promotion. For months, I worked tirelessly on a massive rebranding project for a high-profile client. Late nights, cancelled weekends, and countless revisions. Everyone on the team knew it was my baby. But when the time came to present, Martin swooped in, rehearsed my talking points, and stood on that stage as though he'd built it from scratch. The client was impressed. The company executives were ecstatic. And at the annual awards dinner, Martin's smug smile and champagne, glass in hand, accepted the innovation award for his project. when my name wasn't even mentioned in the credits. Something inside me snapped. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at my laptop, replaying every insult, every sabotage, every smug laugh. For years, I had hoped someone higher up would notice, that HR would intervene, that maybe karma would just take him down naturally. But I realized karma wasn't coming unless I became karma. If Martin had taught me anything, it was that appearances were everything. To the bosses, he was untouchable, a golden boy who delivered results. If I wanted to take him down, I needed to show them what he really was, a fraud. I began collecting evidence, emails where he dismissed my concerns or outright insulted colleagues, draft documents where my name was replaced with his before sending them to clients, Slack messages where he made inappropriate jokes, thinking no one would dare report him. But the most damning piece of evidence came unexpectedly. One evening, Martin asked me to polish up a report he had to submit to the CEO. When I opened the file, my jaw dropped. He had copy-pasted entire sections from a competitor's proposal, word for word, plagiarism. I immediately saved a copy on a secure drive. Suddenly, I had something that could not only discredit him, but also expose him as a liability to the company. I knew if I went directly to HR, Martin would weasel his way out. He had friends in high places, so I needed to time it perfectly. I waited. For weeks, I kept building my case, while outwardly acting like the obedient employee, smiling, nodding, letting him believe he had broken me. Then came the perfect opportunity. Martin announced he was pitching for $1 million contract with a major retail chain. If he landed it, he'd likely get promoted to VP. If he failed, well, I sat in the meeting room as Martin confidently presented his strategies. I watched as executives nodded, impressed by the sleek slides I had spent hours designing. And then right when the pitch was about to wrap up, I raised my hand. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady. I couldn't help but notice that several of these slides looked very familiar. The room fell silent. I pulled out my laptop, connected it to the projector, and displayed a competitor's public proposal published months earlier. Side by side, the slides were identical. Gasps filled the room. The CEO's face turned crimson. "Martin," he barked. "Care to explain this?" Martin stuttered, made excuses, tried to spin it as industry overlap, but it was too late. The executive smelled blood. By the end of the week, Martin was suspended pending investigation. HR dug deeper, and with the evidence I had quietly compiled, they uncovered a pattern: falsified reports, misused company funds, and complaints from other employees that had been previously buried. Within a month, Martin, Blake, the golden boy of the firm, was escorted out of the building with a single cardboard box in his hands. The day he left, the entire office seemed lighter. People smiled more, laughed louder. Colleagues who once whispered in fear openly celebrated. One even brought cupcakes with "Ding Dong, the witch is gone" written in icing. And me, the CEO, personally thanked me for bringing this to light. A week later, I was promoted to senior project lead, ironically, the same promotion Martin had stolen from me years earlier. But the story didn't end there. Months later, I received a LinkedIn notification. Martin had updated his profile. He was now working at a tiny local startup, a far cry from the corporate empire he once ruled. Curious, I clicked on their website. Guess what? The company had posted a job listing: marketing assistant. The pay? Half of what I was currently earning. I laughed out loud. It wasn't just revenge. It wasn't just justice. It was karma striking back with a vengeance.